the year 793 AD, Lindisfarne, an island off the Northumbrian coast, was sacked by a raiding party of Northmen. According to English scholar and clergyman Alcuin of York, the pagans have desecrated God's sanctuary, shed the blood of saints around the altar, laid waste to the house of our hope, and trampled the bodies of the saints like dung in the street. Lindisfarne Island, also known as Holy Island, was the location of a monastery housing a small community of religious orderlies. This tiny spit of land, just 3 miles wide, was actually the base for Christian evangelism in the north of England. To further convey its importance, it is worth mentioning that it was also the home of St Cuthbert, Northumbria's patron saint. Upon his death in the late 600s, Cuthbert's body was first buried in the grounds of the monastery before being exhumed and put on display to the general public. Many devout Christians made the pilgrimage to see Cuthbert's remains via a narrow path which enabled the island to be accessed at low tide and which can still be used today. Largely due to the patron saint, Lindisfarne was a highly important place during the Middle Ages, famous throughout the kingdoms of the British Isles and even further afield in Europe. When the Vikings attacked, they seemingly came without warning. It's not hard to imagine them rowing silently in the dead of night, quietly pulling their ships ashore before launching a completely unexpected raid on Lindisfarne's monastery. The monks wouldn't have stood a chance. There wouldn't have been any weapons to hand, no locks on the doors, and no defences. After all, who would lay siege to God's sanctuary? The Vikings had been mooring their ships up and down the coast of England for several years prior, but aside from one bloody brawl which broke out in Weymouth, these appear to have been trading missions. What occurred at Lindisfarne was savage, unnecessarily violent, and totally unprovoked. For centuries, it has been assumed that the Vikings simply realised that churches and other Christian establishments were easy pickings, but all along, evidence to the contrary has been staring historians in the face. The Holy Roman Emperor Charlemagne of Francia, or France, had been engaged in an almost constant battle with heathens from all over Europe since the beginning of his reign. He saw it as his duty to rid Christendom of all the pagan savages, and in his quest to do so, he gave them a stark choice: convert or die. From existing records written during these turbulent times, it is obvious to see that Charlemagne had already gotten into several altercations with the pagans of Scandinavia. As a result, the Vikings had wisely retreated back to their homelands, for the time being anyway, knowing that the Emperor's armies were far too powerful for them to defeat. So, then, could the uncharacteristically brutal attack on Lindisfarne have been an act of retaliation? News of a raid occurring in such an important holy place would have undoubtedly reached Charlemagne's court. Of course, by the time he heard about it, the culprits would have been long gone. Following the sacking of the Holy Island, many more raids took place, the vast majority of targets being churches and monasteries throughout Northumbria, Scotland and Ireland. Prior to Charlemagne imposing his deadly ultimatum, the Vikings were not known to have attacked any places of worship. Perhaps, then, it is only logical to assume that this was the heathens' revenge for Christians attempting to conquer their culture and eradicate their ancient beliefs. This topic is hotly disputed by historians and enthusiasts alike, but I for one believe this theory, as the level of extreme force used on the unsuspecting defenceless monastic community does not reflect the assumption that all they desired was gold. It would have been far easier to just walk in, brandishing an axe, and simply walk out with the valuable artefacts within, like taking candy from a baby. What are your views? Feel free to let me know in the comments below.